Americans experience power outages lasting an average of 8 hours per year. I know in my situation, I probably tripled that last year. And this number increases dramatically during emergencies and natural disasters. Other events like hacking, war, or terrorism could bring on a grid down situation lasting a whole lot longer than that. Most preppers consider generators the go-to backup power solution, but these generators do come with some significant drawbacks. A quality generator can cost between $500 and $1,500, sometimes even more than that. The noise they generate is significant, and you'll need an outdoor space to run it. It can't be run indoors. A generator also needs constant maintenance and a safe place to store fuel, and as much fuel as you can store. This is not to say that generators aren't a great preparedness supply to have, because they are. But if you're one of those people who doesn't have the space for a generator or you can't afford one, there are a lot of other ways to secure your emergency power without spending a whole lot of money. The good news is there are several affordable options that exist, from simple battery systems to solar power to battery banks, and even your vehicle to keep those devices running during blackouts. Now, there is a trade-off. Preppers often prefer the generators because of their higher output. You can use them for longer, and you can power multiple high wattage devices at the same time. And there really aren't a lot of other options unless you're talking about a generator or a very large, very expensive power bank. So while these batteries and these smaller power banks do have advantages as far as portability, indoor use, they're silent, that meaning you're not going to alert the neighborhood. They aren't going to put out the energy that a large generator would. So with that, let's go ahead and get into what some of these different options are. And these are good whether you have a generator, whether you plan on getting a generator in the future. It's always good to have multiple options available to you, because you just never know how long something is going to last. And the more energy you have stored, the longer you're going to be able to withstand one of these situations. And the first one I've got here is batteries. And you've got your regular alkaline batteries and your rechargeables. Batteries, to me, serve as the first line of defense for emergency power. This is what everybody should have. We have so many different electronic devices these days that we've all probably got batteries laying around our house. In preparedness, we need to have backups to those backups. You can get a case that will store all sorts of different types of batteries, and you can keep them organized. But this is the lowest cost method there is. And for all of the different electronics that we have, this is going to get the job done, unless you're talking about cell phones and tablets, and we'll go into that in a minute. And when it comes to batteries, the battery technology has evolved quite a bit in the last decade since I've been in preparedness. It's no longer the batteries that you would put in the flashlight and then a year later you check them and they've leaked and corroded everything. Battery technology these days means we no longer have to depend on the lead acid batteries or the alkaline batteries. You have the NIMH battery, the low self-discharge batteries. These are like the Eneloop batteries, which are fantastic and can be recharged, used hundreds of times. These batteries keep up to 85% of their charge for a year after they've been in storage, so if they haven't been used, and even 70% of their capacity after about 5 years or so. Then you've also got the lithium primary batteries, which are great for long-term storage because they retain up to 80% of their charge for 15 years. So these are literally a set it and forget it battery. You can use those NIMH batteries for your remotes and things like that, daily use, and still have some of these lithium batteries in your long-term storage. You also want to make sure that these rechargeables are topped off. So every 3 months or so, you want to check your supply and just go through them and make sure everything's topped off, because the last thing you want to do is, in an emergency situation, have 70% of that power that you have available. And as far as recharging these batteries, there are a number of different chargers out there. I have the X-Star VC4, which is a great little charger. It's worked for me for, 5 years or so now. And this charger not only works on AC, but it's a USB charger. So I could actually use a solar panel to turn on this charger and charge those batteries. So think about that as well in a situation. If you have the rechargeables, make sure you have a way to recharge those as well. Now, I mentioned charging cell phones and tablets, and that's where these smaller external power packs or these little battery banks come in. These have been a game changer in preparedness from when I started until now. These pocket-sized little power banks are great for charging cell phones, batteries, radios, and all the things that use very low wattage. You can also add solar charging to these, which gives you a renewable source that keeps these devices charged up after you use them for your cell phones and tablets. Some of these devices will come with a little solar panel on them, and those are basically just junk. What you'd want to do is get at least a 15 or 20 watt solar panel. Those are pretty cost effective and not very expensive, and you can hook that up, and it's going to charge one of these, depending on the size, in 1 day or so. Now, there are hundreds of power bank models, and some of them are better than others. So choose a reliable brand. You get on Amazon, you're going to see 500. I've found that the Anker, Anker, is one of the best and most reliable. They have an Anker 36800, which is a perfect mix of that portability and that charging power. And like I said, all of these have different battery capacities. So you could get one anywhere from 2,000 to 8,000 to even 30,000 milliamp hours of power. And a 20,000 milliamp hour little power pack could charge your smartphone probably 6 to 8 times in an emergency when you don't have power. And when you purchase one of these, think about what types of devices you're going to be charging. There are Type-C, there is USB, there's micro USB. So think about the devices you would be charging and make sure that your little power pack that you're going to purchase has those available. Some of them even have built-in LED lights for emergency lighting. Most of them are weatherproof and dust resistant. And some of the better models have 2 ways to charge, whether you're talking about solar panels or the USB ports for AC charging. So having a few of these lying around in case of an emergency is a great idea, and they can also be used daily as well. Although I would be careful with that because, like I said earlier, you don't want to go into a disaster with your little power pack being half charged. Another option for emergency power is the lower cost portable power stations. These are the ones that are under $200 or so. These are budget-friendly options with impressive performance that are a step above the little power packs that we just talked about. You've got the EcoFlow River 2, which is just under $200 and provides 600 watts of power. I've got the Blue Eddy EB3A, which has got over 3,000 5-star ratings, and you can charge that to 80% in around 60 minutes. And with these smaller power stations, in conjunction with, say, a 100-watt solar panel, and you could go less if you wanted to, but with a 100-watt solar panel, you'll be able to charge these power stations in 1 day if you have good sunlight. So it makes them a great solution for long-term use. Now, again, just like the other ones, these aren't going to power your refrigerator or a hot plate or a space heater, but you will be able to run a couple lights or a few other low wattage AC appliances. The cool thing about these power stations is there's no fuel storage required. They're silent operation, which means you're not going to alert the neighbors. They are safe for indoor use, and there's really zero maintenance cost. So with one of these 500 watt hour power stations, you're looking at, if you're running LED lights, that's about 10 watts. You can run that for about 50 hours. A laptop is 60 watts. You can run that for 8 hours. And a mini fridge is 50 watts, and you could run that for 10 hours on one of these really small power stations and keep a little bit of milk and cheese and things like that cool in a short-term emergency. Another option may be just getting, instead of the power station, just getting a Life PO4 battery. And these lithium iron phosphate batteries are much safer than the lithium batteries you hear about catching fire all the time. That's because they have battery management systems in them and the chemistry is a little bit different. But you could get a Life PO4 battery and an inverter, a 1,000-watt inverter, a 500-watt inverter, whatever you wanted, and put those together, and it's the same thing that you would get from a power station. Now, to recharge these, you would need to get a charge controller to regulate the energy coming from the solar panels. But with the solar panels, a charge controller, the battery, and an inverter, you've basically got a power station right there. And the great thing about this method is that it's scalable. When you buy one of these power stations, you get what you get. But with a Life PO4 battery, you can build your own power station and scale that up. You can take that inverter and change it out from the 500 watts to the 1,000 watts to a 2,000 watt inverter if you wanted. So a Life PO4 battery is a great option. You can get one of the lower cost ones. The lifetimes are a great option for a few $100 and slowly build on that. So it's not one huge investment unless you want it to be. You can build that up over time. And one thing on the inverters, make sure you get a pure sine wave inverter. The modified sine wave inverters are going to be a whole lot less expensive and will run light bulbs and things like that. But for sensitive electronics, you want a pure sine wave inverter. So keep that in mind if you're going to go this route as well. And sort of along the same lines, your car isn't just a way to get around or to bug out. It's also a backup generator waiting to be used. This simple setup allows you to tap into your car's battery power and alternator during crisis and emergencies, and often costs nowhere near what some of these traditional generators or even some of these power stations would cost. And the setup is really simple. You take one of the inverters like I talked about earlier, you hook that up to your battery, and then you have AC power coming out of that inverter. Now, it's important to note you want to keep your car running so you don't drain the battery, and you also want to pay attention to the voltage of your alternator. If your alternator is rated at 100 amps, that means you'll get 100 amps times 12, the 12 volts. So 100 amps times 12 volts equals 1,200 watts of power. You don't want to go over that because then you'll start draining your battery. You've also got the cigarette outlet ports in most vehicles these days, which most are rated at about 300 watts. So you could charge some of these smaller devices and things like that. But again, don't go over that rated wattage, because the last thing you want to do is have a dead battery when you need to evacuate or bug out or use your vehicle. And depending on the wattage of the inverter, you can pick these up for $100 up to $500, $600, depending on what you get. But that's a great way to be able to get power as long as you have enough fuel in your vehicle and enough fuel stored. Now, we've talked about how to power some of these electronic devices and other devices, flashlights and things like that in an emergency or disaster. But you've also got to think about how you're going to cook, heat, maybe cool. So things like that require fuel storage. And if you've got a little bit of fuel stored, there are a number of different options. You've got the butane stoves. I've done a video in the past talking about indoor cooking options. But the butane stoves, you can store that fuel relatively easily. And an Iwatani butane stove can be used indoors, so you're not giving off a lot of cooking smells. And you can heat up cans of soup, cans of beans, boil water, do whatever you want with one of these stoves. Another option is propane, and most of us have the propane grills outside, or a lot of us do. But you've also got the Coleman camp stoves and even the really small hiking stoves that would be beneficial in a situation like this as well. These, you'd need proper ventilation, and these are more for an outdoor type situation, but they are a good option to have. And another outdoor option is the rocket stoves, whether you're talking about a DIY rocket stove, which are fairly easy to make, or you can buy something like the EcoZoom rocket stove. I have a Gas One rocket stove, which looks exactly the same. But these are fantastic because you burn far less fuel than you would in a normal fire, and they put off a whole lot less smoke. So one, you're not going to get smoke in your eyes, and two, you could cook outside more safe than you would with a wood fire as far as the cooking smells and the smoke and all that. You've also got items like sterno or even the alcohol stoves, denatured alcohol that you can use, or even rubbing alcohol. A lot of different options when it comes to cooking, but they all require fuel storage. And along the same lines, you've also got kerosene lanterns or oil lanterns. The Dietz lanterns have become the most popular and the most reliable in the preparedness community, but there are a lot of different options. You need to make sure you have enough fuel stored for those, but that would be a great way to supplement some of that energy that you have stored. So you're not using the flashlights or the lamps or the lanterns that require electricity. You're using the ones that require fuel. And while these are mainly for a light source, they also put off a little bit of heat as well. So if you're heating a small room, having one or two of these lanterns lit is going to raise the temperature a couple degrees maybe and take the chill off a little bit. Another option for heating is the Mr. Buddy heater, and these are propane heaters. They take the small canisters of propane, and these are safe for indoor use as well. So if you're really wanting to raise the temperature of a room, a Buddy heater is by far your best bet to do that. And as far as cooling goes, there are a number of DIY options, and maybe that's a whole separate video, but you could figure out different options for that. You've got battery-powered fans, and even AC fans that take up very little energy. So just make a list of all the different things that you may want to power in an emergency or a disaster and figure out what your options are. Traditional generators may seem like the obvious choice, and they are a really good choice, but sometimes you just don't have the room for them or you don't have the money for them. And if this is the case, we're going to have to make the best of the situation we are in and figure out what our options might be. And smart preppers know the value of layered power options, meaning you have a lot of different options at your disposal for these situations. So that means having a number of batteries for your different electronics, a couple of ways to charge those batteries, those rechargeables, maybe some power banks, and just slowly over time, start building up on that and expanding that out. And in no time at all, you'll have a really good alternative energy plan. Now, I know there are a number of other options as well, and if you guys have any, make sure and leave those in the comments below. There are a lot of DIY options, and it's sort of a think outside of the box type situation when it comes to this. If you can't afford or don't have the space for a generator, what are your options at that point? And that's what we need to be thinking about, is how we're going to be able to power some of these things and what we are going to be able to power, because it's going to be completely different than what we are used to today. But I'd love to get your guys' thoughts in the comments. Make sure and leave one below. If you haven't subscribed, make sure and subscribe to the channel. I do videos once or twice a week. But with that, take care and prepare, everyone. We will talk to y'all later.